Comrades and friends, every time these tragedies occur, it is very painful for all of us. Tomorrow is the one-year anniversary of the mass shooting in a black church in Charleston, South Carolina, where 9 of our sisters and brothers were killed, and we remember how the black community and all of us felt 1 year ago tomorrow. Each tragedy, like the massacre of little children at Sandy Hook, pulls on our heartstrings. Orlando is no different. Since the tragedy of the killing on Saturday, June 11th, of 49 lesbian, gay, bi, trans, and queer people, and maybe a couple of straight folks, at the Pulse Bar in Orlando, Florida, our heart has been heavy. I don't think there's been a day that some of us have not cried at least once a day. It could have been any of our comrades. Comrade Rebecca, Comrade Imani, Comrade Leilani often go to gay bars all the time. Shelley's best friend, a lesbian, is right now visiting her parents in Florida and had planned to go to a bar this weekend. For generations, the gay bar, and I'm saying gay because it's gay bar because it's, you know, old-fashioned kind of formulation, but I'm going to use it. For generations, the gay bar has been a refuge, a place of refuge, safe space, often the only place that a queer person can feel comfortable, relax, hold hands, kiss, without the fear of harassment or violence, and just be yourself. Since Saturday, there's been much talk of love and solidarity, especially from the victims. This is actually very encouraging, as they appear to not be getting caught up in the anti-Muslim hysteria. We talk of love too, because there's no greater love than the love a revolutionary has for the working class. How wonderful if love alone could suffice, because until we abolish capitalism, we must struggle, organize, and fight back. From the very second that the tragedy occurred at the Pulse Bar, the messaging from the corporate media has been how this incident can be used to intensify repression, to heighten Islamophobia, to strengthen the state apparatus. The act committed by Omar Mateen, who is Afghani American, was of course heinous, terrible. But we do not blame the shooter. We blame the capitalist system that creates the kind of conditions that compel individuals in this direction. Today, who are they going after more than anybody? It is, of course, Noor Salam, Omar's wife. She is Palestinian. Who should they be going after? Governor Rick Scott, who has been anti-gay from day one. He is the one who has the blood of the Pulse martyrs on his hands. Scott has supported the anti-trans bathroom bill and also signed a bill to permit clergy and businesses to defy the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage. He, like everybody else in the media, barely and reluctantly said the word LGBTQ on Sunday, and instead went right to the anti-Muslim racist terrorism rhetoric. It was hours on Sunday before anyone mentioned LGBTQ, unless they were bashing other countries. If you want to blame a religion, blame it on the Christian right, who has introduced 200 anti-LGBT bills in the last 6 months. But of course it's not religion, it's the system that produces these divisions. Let me be sure to say, we reject the scapegoating of Noor Salam. It did not matter what she knew or did not know. She herself may have been a victim of domestic violence. Every day, especially since September the 11th, the Muslim community in the U.S. and abroad has been besieged, vilified, scapegoated, terrorized, every day receiving messages that their lives are of no worth. There are racist roundups, infiltration, and occupation of the Muslim community that started long before this election year, but is heightened by the demagogue Donald Trump. It is no surprise, therefore, if one does not turn in another Muslim to the government in this climate. It is also no surprise if Omar might have turned his rage inwards, might have been himself struggling with his own sexuality, or emotionally and psychologically disabled. We do not know. But in this climate, without a revolutionary class outlook, he turned his rage against another oppressed group. But again, it is the system's fault, not Omar's. Because capitalist society, corrupt and sick, breeds alienation, alienation from the fruit of our labor and alienation from each other. Individualism is touted. If you are homeless or jobless, it is your fault. If you are black or brown, queer, Muslim, woman, native, your oppression is boundless. One of my goals here tonight is to make sure we clarify some of the issues that have been raised in the wake of the Orlando tragedy. And one of them, it's a minor one, but I think it's important, is genocide comparing. The media has called this the worst mass murder in U.S. history. We know that's not true. The history of indigenous people in this country alone testifies that this is not true. What about Tulsa, Oklahoma in the 20s? What about slavery? And so on and so on. But the comments from movement people to slam this phrase that this is the worst mass murder in U.S. history, in my humble opinion, is something we in this room should not do. A noted black author said it best, so I'm going to quote her. "I feel not okay about two things," she said. "No, the media should not say that what happened in Orlando is the worst mass murder in U.S. history, because U.S. history is all about mass murder. That said, acknowledged and mourned, is it right to hijack this moment of grief by suggesting that it's not the winner of the atrocity Olympics?" End quote. Another person also commented on this issue, that genocide shaming was a way for a person to distance themselves or denigrate the queer community. But now more than ever, we must show our utmost unconditional solidarity with the LGBTQ community. One of the political pundits said, "LGBTQ history is forged in fire. Indeed, Pulse is not the first bar. It probably won't be the last. There are a number of examples of gay bars that have been attacked, many where scores of LGBTQ people have died. In 1973, for example, an arson was set at a New Orleans bar where 32 people died. Many have still not been identified to this day, because it is common, especially in the past, for people not to go with their real ID because they were closeted. And now 49 Latino and African Americans, or black, I actually don't know if they were African Americans, and now 49 Latino and black people join the list of those victimized by this anti-LGBTQ system. Saturday night was so-called Latin theme night. So it was packed with brown and black people, and so therefore an overwhelming majority of victims were Latinos or Latinas. Florida is home to a high number of Latino and Latina people. It has the third largest Latino population in the country, with 24%, and is growing. A high percentage of those killed at Pulse were Puerto Rican, who make up the largest segment of the Latino population. Because of the horrific economic crisis on the island and the debt imposed by colonialism, Puerto Rico is experiencing the greatest mass exodus of its people in 50 years, and yet another example of forced migration brought on by the current capitalist crisis. Its debt to the U.S. exceeds a whopping $72 billion. This is, of course, a debt that we demand be canceled and reparations paid instead. The Pew Center estimates that the island's population has dropped each year by 11,000 people a year, mainly due to high unemployment and the cost of living. Annual departures more than quadrupled to 48,000 people between 2010 and 2013. Many of those people moving to Central Florida. Orlando has a strong appeal for young, unemployed Puerto Ricans because there are many entry-level jobs at Disney World and other parts of the tourist industry that are a lure. There's no jobs back home. The Pulse tragedy therefore becomes yet another blow to Puerto Rico and another reason not to enter Pulse into the Atrocity Olympics, and a big reason to go to the Puerto Rican event at 11:99 tomorrow night. Many of the killed and injured at Pulse have the added burden of being far from their homelands. The vast majority were Puerto Rican, but many also were from Venezuela, from Mexico, and from other parts of Latin America. Their families and friends are now struggling with the high cost of getting their bodies back home and to come up with the money for hospital costs. Many GoFundMe accounts have been set up, and one group has already raised over $3 million. And we hope that it's not like the situation in Haiti, where billions are raised for earthquake relief and so on, but very rarely gets to the people. For many of the victims, it is another burden that this was the first time that their friends and families even found out they were gay. One Mexicano killed was married and had 2 children, and his family did not even know he had been there at the bar until they were told he was killed. Despite the progress that has been made by our community, like same-sex marriage, we must be reminded that life is still hard for the queer community and will continue to be so under capitalism. For example, an FDA ban on gay blood donors meant that many friends and family members of the victims could not donate blood because of this repressive FDA ban. LGBT youth deal with bullying every damn day. They are harassed and experience violence all the time. A study showed that students constantly heard bigoted verbal abuse like homo or fag or sissy more than 24 times per day, which is one derogatory comment every 15 minutes of each day. 80% of queer youth report severe social isolation. It has gotten better, but we have a long way still to go. This is why we must demand that the Orlando Pulse tragedy not be used for ratcheting up Islamophobia, but instead must escalate the struggle. Just 3 days after Orlando, Republicans blocked a vote on a proposal that would ensure that federal contractors could not discriminate against workers on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identification. This is a show of how hypocritical these elected officials are. Where was the filibuster by the Democrats on this? Why did it take them so long to begin with to pass same-sex marriage? Instead, we see finally a little spine over the issue of gun control. But where was the filibuster for Trayvon Martin or Eric Gardner or Sandra Bland? Where was the filibuster for trans murders such as that of Islam Nettles? An LGBTQ activist said on Facebook, "Our souls have died, and the only thing that remains alive is the Second Amendment." There is growing mass anger on the issue of gun control, so let me take a minute to address it. Gun control, unfortunately, is not the issue. As long as you have the contradictions, social, political, and economic, of capitalist exploitation, an individual will find a way to do some harm. As long as there is no care for those who are emotionally or psychologically disabled, as long as the ruling class is allowed to foster divisions, as long as it allows clan-like groups to exist, but destroys groups of the oppressed, murder and tragedy will continue to occur. As long as Dylan Roof, the shooter at the Charleston tragedy, is treated to a burger, while a black or brown person is treated to a beating, this will go on. If rope had been prevented from selling, would that have stopped the lynchings after slavery or in the 1920s? Of course not, because the tool is not the tool that is used, it is the context of the society they are used in. Guns are a $4 billion industry. They are profitable. They are most dangerous in the hands of the right wing, and so will be continued to be so they can be used to terrorize the oppressed and sow divisions among the working class. But there is a new mood in the country. People are floored and flabbergasted why anyone sane would want to buy the kind of weapon that only serves to kill many people at one time. I can just imagine what the Cubans are thinking. At the Sunday demo, the Sunday demo where several of us went to Sheridan Square to participate in an action the day of the tragedy and became a street meeting. Are you talking about this, Leilani? Okay, so I'll talk about that. So it became like a street meeting, and it was mainly white, but a lot of people of color, and basically the party took over the rally. When we took over, along with other oppressed people here, PPA folks and Black Lives Matter folks, we all sort of collectively came together when they started to, some of the people started to Muslim bash. And we stopped it. We said, not the issue, not the issue, and we were able to turn it around. But there was another woman who started yelling that, very emotional, very, very upset, and she was saying, it's the NRA, it's gun control. And as the people of color and our allies were a little box, we were saying, well, I wouldn't mind having a gun. And all the people of color sort of got it, like, yeah, not the issue. But we understand the sentiment behind this, and we have to be very sensitive, especially with mothers of color, Black and Latino, who have lost children to so-called gun violence, the mothers of Sandy Hook, and so on. And we understand their heartful desire to control guns, which is really a desire to live in peace. But that's not the issue. It's not the issue at all. What's needed is money for jobs, for emotional care, and so forth. That's what's going to help. A nation that is founded on violence is going to promote violence. And of course, the elephant in the room is that the most dangerous guns are not held by a Muslim, but by a cop. Want to do a filibuster that means something? Filibuster disarming the police. Finally, comrades and friends, sisters and brothers, we are saddened indeed by yet another atrocity, yet another senseless tragedy, and there is surely more to come. We mourn the loss of our 49 lesbian, bi, trans, queer comrades. But we are heartened nonetheless. We are encouraged by the outpouring of solidarity. Two young men who have been lovers, their parents buried them together and said they wouldn't be able to get married or live together, but they could at least be buried together. The fact, and also like here in New York City, this Monday, a Muslim woman was harassed on the train and was yelled and spit at and told violent things about going back and all of that. She was called a terrorist. And the whole train responded to shout the harassers back, and they said, this is New York, we are diverse, we have rights to be here, we can love whoever we want, whatever religion. And frankly, I've been in the train a lot when things happen. A lot of people don't respond. And I think that the fact that the entire train responded is an indication of how things are turning. Everyday consciousness is growing. That's solid, and people understand that solidarity is the issue. Now that consciousness has to turn into action, into struggle. Trump has opened up an avalanche of racist, dangerous rhetoric. Hillary Clinton is not much better. However, she's just smarter and a little bit more established. But soon there will be an avalanche of resistance to both of them. The tears that so many people shed this week, not just in Florida, not just in this country, not just in Puerto Rico or Latin America, but around the world, are not signs of weakness. They are the water that will make a flood of resistance and revolution. It is these tears and this pain that will wash away our oppression once and for all. Long live the Pulse martyrs.